Welcome to this month's Centennial Conversation. We are honored to have you each here for this month's April Minority Health Month conversation. And this is our 9th Centennial Conversation for those of you that have been coming back to each of the ones that we started since August 1st on Henrietta Lacks' birthday. And as you know, our goal is to continue to educate the next generation, one conversation at a time. So we're excited today to have Veronica joining us again. Veronica Robinson is Henrietta Lacks' great-granddaughter, and you've had a chance to learn more about her story through the Centennial series and some of our other projects. We are honored to also have two of her dear long-term friends, Dr. Robert Winn, the director of Virginia Commonwealth University's Massey Cancer Center, and also Dr. Karriem Watson, who's the associate executive director of the University of Illinois Mile Square Health Center. So this is an excellent opportunity for you if you're a practitioner, an expert, if you're kind of budding in this field or just new to the conversation. We're going to talk more about minority disparities during Minority Health Month, but as you may know, we're called the new majority. So we know that there's been so many shifts in this community, and what better experts to sit down and learn from today. We want to thank them both for representing their organization and continuing to collaborate with the Lacks family. And as we move forward, I'm Shirria Thompson again here as a collaborator. And we'd like to take a moment to learn where you came and just welcome you to the conversation as well. So if you'd like to share in the chat, you can go ahead and let us know why you chose to join today's Centennial conversation. All right, let's see if we've got any responses. Excellent. Good afternoon. It's great to hear from you as well. Well, if you'd like to share why you came, let us know. Someone said working on learning more. I love it. Thank you, Heidi Vonner. And if you're interested in joining the conversation and you're not in the Zoom, that's okay, because you're welcome to join us as well on Facebook. So you can join the conversation by sharing your comments, submitting questions for the speakers in the chat or in the Q&A. And then also, if you need help, you can email us at impact@HELA100.org, and we'll make sure to get you the support you may need. So if you're on Zoom, again, welcome. If you are on Facebook Live, which we know many of the Lacks family members join us from and contribute to the chat, feel free to say hello to the Lacks family members there and ask any questions. Our team's also monitoring the Facebook chat as well, so you've got a chance to chat it up also today during the conversation. And then if you're watching us after on demand on YouTube, thank you for coming and joining our channel. If you're listening and you've had a chance to subscribe, that's excellent because you can get all the up-to-the-minute updates. But if you haven't, we definitely encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is where we share all of the Centennial conversations. All right, so again, our mission is to work to honor and preserve the legacy of Henrietta Lacks, and we do that by educating the next generation. Not only on who she was, but also the impact of the immortal HeLa cells. And then, as everyone knows, our goal through HELA100 is to promote health equity and social justice. So I'm honored to hand it over to Veronica to get started. As you know, we have been investing in the next generation, and Veronica is actually in the field as well in science, medicine, and research. And so if you'd like to also join us in making that investment, you can head to HELA100.org to give or become a monthly sustainer to make sure that we can continue to have great conversations like this one and do the community work that we've been doing through HELA100. Our speakers today, again, are Dr. Robert Winn and Dr. Karriem Watson, and I'm gonna let Veronica introduce them because those are two brothers in the fight that she's been working with for a while. Veronica?
Thank you, Shirria. Oh my goodness, it's such an honor to get you guys together again. I think last time we were all together, it was in Chicago. So thank you for being part of this conversation. Not only being part of this conversation, I know you guys are big on continuing the conversations. So just thank you. You know, I think UIC, we first met, that was about 5-7 years. Feels like a lifetime ago.
2016, 2017, I know.
Okay, tell my age, because I'm old, I can't remember. But I'm gonna jump you guys straight into the conversation because I know you have a lot of substance to share with everybody who's viewing, and I know that the Lacks family are virtually viewing, and we want to thank everyone who's tuned in today. And whether you're viewing via Zoom or Facebook Live, and if you just want to share this conversation with your friends, please continue your support. We very much appreciate it. And you can go to HELA100.org to view this conversation or any past conversations. So let's jump right in. So guys, can y'all share your role and how you became a leading expert in minority health?
Dr. Watson.
My answer is I met Dr. Winn. That's how I became a. That's how I got. My answer is simple. So I think we got to let Dr. Winn start off with his journey, because he's opened the door for so many of us, and I don't say that in hyperbole. I really do mean that. It's researchers like Dr. Winn who literally created spaces and places for researchers. When I met Dr. Winn, I was a young scientist. Now I'm a middle-aged scientist, but really it's because of research, of commitment of people like Dr. Winn. So I think if he starts off with his journey, that would be amazing.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, listen, man, the bottom line is, James Brown was hot, but he was the hottest was when he was Bobby Bird. So let's quit playing around. I mean, it takes more than a single person. So, but I appreciate that. I would say that bottom line is, I think just like what you all are trying to do about bringing attention, it takes a level of fearlessness and it takes a level of commitment. And so I would say that when I started, I could give you the whole story about how I wanted to be a scientist all my life and a doctor, but that would be a lie. I mean, the reality is I grew up like a lot of, African-American men, and particularly in the circumstances that I came up. My mom was 15. And so, I can't actually say that I came from a long lineage of the talented 10th. And for those of you on here, you know that, what that is. I can't claim that. But what I can claim is that I knew what an opportunity looked like. And so when I was growing up, the biggest dream I actually had was being a foreman at GM. As luck would have it, people saw things in me that I didn't see myself. So when Dr. Watson sort of says that, setting the stage for people, it's because that's what I've been. I mean, that has been my path forward, of that people setting the stage for me. Would not have gone, at Notre Dame. I probably, even to this day, still with Father McNeil, when he was trying to say, well, what do you want to do, son? And I was like, well, I want to do something that gives me a job back at GM, because that's what my mind is. On the real. And then to actually be able to have folks like Father Walters, Father Austin, who saw something in me that I didn't see in myself, that challenged me to say, here's an opportunity, will you take it? Has been really a path forward. I think my path in science has really been directly related to my experience at University of Michigan, where Francis Collins, the Francis Collins at the NIH, was a genetics teacher, and really started, poking me and prodding me about, I think you ought to think about research. And so I have to say that I am here today, not because of me, but because of the willingness to have others see things in me and be able to entertain that thought, and then be able to take the opportunities of it. So my goal right now as a cancer center director of an NCI designated cancer center is important. I knew that when I was even in Chicago, I think, and Dr. Watson knows this, my goal was to say, let's break the ceiling, because we're celebrating not only the centennial of Henrietta Lacks, but we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of the creation of the cancer centers, designated cancer centers, and the war on cancers, which started back in 1971. So in 2019, when I accepted this position, and being the only African-American cancer center director of an NCI designated cancer center, meant something to me, that it wasn't just doing it for me, it wasn't just doing it locally, it was doing and breaking another barrier that ultimately I wanted to do. So I'm really big into the context of paying it forward. So currently I'm the director of the VCU Massey Cancer Center, which was federally designated, early one, back in 1972, 74. And I'm proud to sort of have been there since 2019, but we got more work to do about bringing equity to the table.
And to echo what Dr. Winn said, I remember Dr. Winn was one of the first people I met that told me, so many of us young scientists, particularly when you have an interest in disparities, and to Dr. Winn's point, when you bring your lived experience to the work that you do, you know that it's not enough for me just to study, to think about this. Or there may be some people that do just study the cellular aspect of cancer, which is perfect because you need those type of scientists as well. But when you're the type of scientist that wants to say that I want to have an understanding of what's happening at the cellular level, but I also want to have an understanding of what's happening at the clinical level, at the bedside, but I also want to have an understanding of what's happening at the community level. And many times we're discouraged from doing that. So Dr. Winn was one of the first people that says that, yeah, you can bring all that to the table, but you got to focus. And you got to be intentional about that. And so meeting him really helped me understand how to hone the research questions that I would address, and to think about, and he encouraged me to think about community engagement and community engaged research as a science, to think about, it's not just about bringing people together. And we used to joke about it and say that, we call these Saturday sessions that we used to have with them as the kind of these producing sessions where you would get your research idea and you would come into the studio and you would talk about what that research idea was, and you would pitch it like you would pitch an album or pitch album songs. He was like, yeah, no, that's not going to sell. The people don't want that. That beat is too slow. But, using those real life experiences to think about how can we really, truly bring our lived experiences. And, coming off this, I wasn't introduced to science way too early through a personal experience. My birth mother actually was diagnosed with breast cancer when I was a young child, and she ended up dying from breast cancer at an early age. So I was introduced to the concept of cancer and cancer disparities. Then growing up in a small town, I never knew what an academic medical center was. I didn't know what a cancer center was. But then as I got older, then as I became an undergraduate at the University of Michigan, I saw what it meant for people who got their care in these small towns, how their outcomes seemed different than people who traveled to Ann Arbor to get their care at these big cancer centers. So I started to think about, so where you live and the places that you live, that can determine your health outcome. And then I got the benefit of being able to work in a cancer center. And Dr. Winn had this idea to say, Karriem, I want to create an office of community engagement that also engages research, and talks about engaging minority serving institutions. And so we set on this path to create an office that looked at community engagement and community engaged research. And one of the things that I was really, really excited about of the work that we did was thinking about how do we bring the community to the table. And so that's what all of my research was. And the way we even met you, Veronica, and I'm sure we'll get into this later, was we were getting ready to start the Precision Medicine Initiative. And we knew that we could not start that conversations around precision medicine without, at the very least, thinking about a family, having a conversation with a family that really is the mother of precision medicine.
I agree.
Yeah, something both of you guys said, especially Dr. Winn, resonated with me when you said someone seen something in you that you didn't see in yourself. And I think that's definitely what brought all of us together. And Dr. Dara, I think you guys were the first ones to tell me, like, you're going to be a really powerful activist. You're going to be able to do this. And we see you doing some things, and it really sharpened my understanding of not only who I was going to become and who I'm still becoming, but it also sharpened my understanding of what my legacy was and what my purpose was and what we brought to the table, because we are not just a family. We became a family of research, science, and medicine. Like, our story started resonating to the rest of the world, and it was important for us to have conversations and be at the table and not just topics of discussions at the table, so that we can advocate for people who look like us. And that was powerful when you guys had pushed me into that realm to have that voice, and it just took off. And I'm so grateful to have these friendships. But can I ask y'all, as we enter into Minority Health Month, what are the most pressing issues that you're working to address? I know that we have so many things that in our work that could be addressed, but what are the most pressing issues?
Yeah, I think, so I'm going to answer that this way. We've been addressing those pressing issues since 1899 and before. Now, why 1899? 1899 was the first time it was written by W.E.B. Du Bois, who clearly wrote in the Philadelphia papers the issues around inequities and the two separate and unequal Americas. The same issues. poor housing, the same issues, educational differences, lack of access to good education, lack of access to good quality healthcare, the inequities in the way policing gets done was all written about in 1899. So what I'm trying to tell folk now is, you gotta, what you say, we gotta get real with the fact of the matter is the same things that are urgent now were the same things urgent back in 1899 and in 1960s. So I want to stop playing that health equity somehow, for example, just got on the mark. Because the other thing I want to tell you is that, the other thing is when if you don't know your history, not only are you damned to repeat it again, but you just damned because you have no center about knowing where you all fit. For example, we all tripping around this pandemic and that we had all the stuff with George Floyd, not recognizing that in 1918, that pandemic, actually, we lost 675,000 people in that flu pandemic. We didn't even have a vaccine, but anyways, 675,000. But we also lost a huge number of people that year. It was probably the worst ratio during 1918 and 1921. We lost more African Americans by gun violence and death and hangings and lynching and all the rest of these things during that same period. And yet we act like this pandemic and racial unrest is the first time it's ever happened. My goal, what's urgent for me right now, is to reconnect people to a reality that we have had a past, and that to reconnect people that the same urgent matters we have at the moment have been here. So let's stop playing. So if there's anything I'm taking out of this, it is to actually get real and understand that we have understood health disparities. I ain't letting nobody off the hook. And in fact, we even have solutions for it. The doggone thing that's missing is just simply the will. It's like a doggone diet. We know, losing weight. Listen, all of us gained a little bit of weight during COVID, me included. I'm just letting you know. So, but I do know that we know the benefits of losing weight. I also know that there's 5,000 different, diet plans that I could pick one and stick to it, and I'd find results. And yet, when it comes to issues around disparities, we don't actually pick and commit. We just talk. And so if there's any urgency, is to get up off the backside and let's get on something. Get up on the good stroke and let's move it around. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we have to, at this point, address the issues around health disparities, which is my focus. But the nice thing is, like everything else, we got many flavors. So there's people going to be looking at social justice through the science lens. That's what we're doing. Social justice through the legal lens. It's time for us to be connected more than we are more than we have been ever before. So that's my urgency, is to get reconnected with the fact that some of these things ain't new. Let's just commit to something and get something done this year. And I don't even care what it is, small or large. Let's just commit to getting something done. That'll be my first start.
That's powerful.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that we said the same thing, and to echo so much of what Dr. Winn said, is that as we move into Minority Health Month, I think those of us that do health disparities research, every month is April. Just like colleagues of mine that do breast cancer disparities research, and they say that every month is October for them. For those of us that do health equity work, every single month is April, Minority Health Awareness Month, because we're bringing awareness to the issues of minority health. I have the luxury of sitting in two places. I serve as both the Associate Executive Director of the Miles Square Health Center, which is one of the nation's oldest community health clinics. And Veronica, you had the opportunity to tour our Miles Square, right?
One of my favorite places.
I ran across a paper, Dr. Winn, that was published on Miles Square around 1969. If I would have taken that date, and it was talking about the health disparities because Miles Square got its name because in the city of Chicago, and all of this was post-visit by Dr. King, right? When Dr. King visited Chicago, he began to uncover the sanitation and strike workers and everything. He began to cover a lot of the health disparities that existed in the public housing entity at that time in Chicago. And Miles Square got its name because for 1 square mile radius in Chicago, we carried some of the worst health outcomes in the country. Okay. And this was right after President Johnson came with the war on poverty. And after that war on poverty, they understood that you can't have a war on poverty without addressing healthcare as well. So if I would have redacted the year of when that paper was published, and I'm looking through those health disparities, the sad thing is that that paper could have been written yesterday. And what I'm seeing, and one of my colleagues was talking about all these grants now that are coming out about addressing systemic racism. And one of my colleagues kind of got a little salty because she was like, why now are they giving us funding to address systemic racism? I said, why not now? Because what they understand is that to ask a question about epigenetics and zip codes and breast cancer and prostate cancer and lung cancer without understanding how systemic racism actually impacts how someone shows up to a clinic, how they experience that clinic, how they're treated when they get to that clinic, or the environment that they have to go back in and live in after they leave that clinic, to address just the cancer or that person's cancer is not addressing the systemic issue. So I'm happy that funders are now saying, I want you to address systemic racism. I just hope that when they put that call out there for us to address systemic racism, that they're ready to take that deep look at what the system has done for years to people.
Yeah, I was, when I got to go to and see Miles Square, I was so impressed with everything that was in the building and how you guys were interacting with the patients, and still saddened that this was developed in a community where, like you said, within a mile radius, like people weren't getting what they need. And I often ask myself, when I think about my great-grandmother's story, like, are we still in the time where my great-grandmother received care? Because we are still faced with the same, and a lot of the same systemic racism and conversations that we had in the past. And it's just like these things are being swept under the rug, and people are, you know, trying to downplay it because we're in another day and time. And they're like, well, this was in the past, but the past has become our present. And like Dr. Winn said, we got to reconnect the people with reality. Like that reality we face every day, that reality that for some people, they only see that reality when it's televised on the news, but we live those realities every day. And that's why these conversations are important. So to move forward, because I don't want to waste everybody's time, because, you know, we can all get together and talk and talk and talk. But we're so excited about the opportunities here, continue to work with both of you guys. Can you share what your role and what you believe patient advocates like me and my family, what can we do to achieve health equity? Like, what role do we have to play?
Dr. Watson, go ahead.
I think it's paramount. I think to do this work and not have the patients, and to voice the patients at the table, it's to do this work only partially. Because it's one thing to think about the work in our scientific view, but you're missing the lived experience, right? I have a great community advocate who's she's on our community advisory board for our now cancer director, Dr. Jan Kidieski, and her name is Candace Henley. We just came out of March, our colorectal cancer awareness month. And right after Chadwick Boseman's untimely death from colorectal cancer, Candace reached out to me via text and was like, Karriem, what can I do to lend my voice as a patient who was diagnosed before at a young age for colorectal cancer? How can I lend my voice to the work that you're doing? And so now when I think about designing a research study for colorectal cancer screening, I can run that by Candace as a patient advocate. And I can say, Candace, does this make sense? This is what I want to do from a screening perspective, but what am I missing? And she will readily say, oh, you're missing this. If your study is taking place from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., you're going to miss some people. You need to think about what is going to be your access issues on weekends. Are you going to be able to have some of these conversations in the evening? Because that same population that's impacted by colorectal cancer is probably the same population that's impacted by elevated tobacco use. It's probably the same population that's living in community areas where they can't socially distance and impacted by elevated risk to COVID-19. And the same population that may have what I call a justified side eye, to understanding for vaccine uptake. I'm reluctant to talk about a lot of the vaccine hesitancy because as the scientific community, we have to do a better job of having these shared decision-making conversations. And Black and brown people, like you said, have often been on the not so good side of being treated by the healthcare system. So we can't be surprised when people are a little reluctant about vaccine uptake. And we as scientists have to do our job of taking the voice of patients and advocates, because the reality of it, Veronica, is that with all the letters and credentials that I have, the important thing is when I can say I can speak to the great-granddaughter of Henrietta Lacks to hold me accountable. Yes, I have an ethics review board that's going to hold me accountable to my research. I have an IRB, but what really spiritually and scientifically holds me accountable is knowing that I have to be able to talk to you as my friend and colleague and say, Veronica, this is what we're doing. And without your voice at the table, I think the work is incomplete.
I agree. I'd echo that, and I'd also sort of say we also need actually the prayers and the courage of not just the past, but what's about to come. I'm gonna need some help, y'all. Here's the deal. We can't do nothing different without doing something different. And so one of the things that, and Veronica, one of the things we've been proposing, and and I'm gonna give Karen Winkfield and some other folk, and Shante Chambers and some other folks a shout out, because we've come up now with something called a health equity report card. We're gonna need the support of community advocates all across the country, and HELA100 and your family. I'm gonna need your prayers and your support, because as we move this concept down the field, it's gonna give me some resistance. I get it. But what's the old adage? What's not measured is not done. Well, I'm going to say, well, let's then measure some things around health equity. So we've come up now with a concept through the NCCN, and now I'm on the national board for the ACS as well, of pushing them to all of a sudden sort of say, well, if you can measure quality and safety, and if you wind up measuring quality and safety, we know as a measurement of that, people have become safer, people have gotten better quality care. Well, why not with equity? Why not actually measure how many people you actually have on clinical trials, or whether you even ask? Why not? Because most of the minorities that are not on clinical trials, we have this narrative that we're so hesitant. But I want to go back to what some of the work your boy has done, Warner, back at Tuskegee, who says it's not so much hesitancy, but if you look at the refusal rate, African Americans and white folks about the same refusal rate. So quit playing that there's something that we don't want to participate in, even though we have a bigger reason. To be hesitant is not the same as refusal. To be hesitant about, let me know a little bit more about this vaccine is not the same as saying that, yeah, I know if it's good for me, I am gonna refuse it, but I'm a little hesitant. You need to explain this to me more because of what you did, not only to your great-grandmother, but folks that was part of the United States public health thing of 1932 that we call Tuskegee. Come on, quit playing. So when people say, well, what can we do? We need not only your prayers, but we need your voices at the table, because when we start talking about how do we actually shine up the health equity report card, which will have 17 measures, and you have some of your most pristine institutions and they get a C, there's gonna be some rumblings around that. Right? We penalize sometimes our hospitals and health systems that have less resources, but the reality is they're taking care of most of the vote. So we need to balance these things off by doing things differently. So we're about ready to get bold up in here and start doing some things that we should have been doing 30, 40, 50 years ago, but we're gonna put them in place now. And what the help we need is your prayers and your support and your voices, and at times being shoulder to shoulder with us, because that time will come. But we can, we all gonna be vaxxed up. So that time will come when we physically need to be shoulder to shoulder, showing up to these places and actually having our government help us do the right thing, and our health systems help us do the right thing when it comes to equity.
One of the important things about this friendship that everybody's viewing on this screen is that there's a level of commitment and accountability. We all have the understanding that we have to do our part, and in order to do our part, we have to tell our colleagues and our friends, we have to look at them and say, that don't seem so ethical, and you're sweeping that under the rug, and you're not thinking in this area, and you're not, we gotta be friends enough, and we have to be great enough to hold people accountable and say, this is not okay. And a lot of times people are just like let's just roll with it to keep this person from doing this, or roll with it because we don't want budget cut in this area. But we have to begin to hold people accountable. And I think that's what's going to bring me to my next question, like, because we know that in medical and the research community, we got to speak up about these health inequities and medical racism. So for you guys, why is it important for us to speak up about these things?
I would say that even if I wanted to, even if I didn't want to, it was going to happen. Since 10 years old, I've been speaking. You're looking at a person that was part of maybe that last generation of what they call forced busing. But, you know, I remember actually at a 10-year-old having grown men talk about breaking my arms and spitting and all the rest of this, simply because we were trying to get an education to do integration. My grandfather, you know, his spirit lives with me, that he had to leave Alabama. And I will give you this, my grandmother reminds me that it was one of the good white folk in Alabama at the time where he lived, a little small town, who was so worried about him being hung that he told his mother that that was about to go down. And so they got him out of Alabama. So the reality is, for most folk, they think that this is a choice, but they're only fooling themselves. The reality is the equities continue to exist because people are in this la-la land that they have a choice not to be active. The reality is, when you're sitting on that couch, you saying something, right? When we are losing the courage to speak up, we're doing something. And so for me, this is not so much of a joining in an awareness. This is what I was born into. This is what I was born into. And the fact of the matter is that I've seen my mother, my grandfather, and my uncles and aunts during that period of time where I grew up having to stand up for their own rights. In fact, my father even had to, you know, to sort of say, well, you know what? Y'all think y'all bad? I'll quit this job, and we're gonna find out if you can, who gonna run that tractor for you next. And they had to call him back. You know what he got? He got an air conditioner up in his crane. He got some extra money in his pocket. And that's, from a young fella, I was sort of seeing that the reality is you got to stand up and advocate. And if you can't advocate for the folk that you supposedly taking care of, what we here for? So why? The why is I've been wired, and it's my calling. It's not everybody's calling. But, you know, but the reality is I know what I'm supposed to do while I'm here on the planet. So that's what I'm committed to doing. That's the why for me.
I agree with Dr. Winn. This is not just, I don't just do health disparities research. I live it. I live it and I breathe it, because I'm never satisfied, and I'm always curious, and I'm always committed, because until everybody has the access, you know, when I was my other mother died recently of lung cancer, and when everybody can have the access that I had to be able to call Dr. Winn up and to be able to say, did she get molecular targeted testing to be able to get molecular targeted treatment? Just that one call to Dr. Winn extended her quality of life. And I'm careful to say that. So although it only extended her life for a year, it was the quality of life she had for that year. The chemo type of treatment she was able to get was an elevated type of treatment that allowed her to have a better quality of life, that gave us a full year to be able to reconcile and to be able to come to grips with the fact that she was transitioning. Because sometimes we don't talk enough about quality of life. We talk about quantity of years, but not always the quality of life. You can go on to make a miracle drug to allow someone to live for 10 years, but what was that quality of living that they had in those 10 years? And so for me, it's not an option, because I stand on the shoulders of so many people that have gone before me. And I like to say that sometimes I feel like my life is the amen to prayers that went on long before me, because there was someone that prayed to be able to do some work that I'm doing, that they knew that because of the time that they lived in, they would, when I walk through a front door, I don't take that for granted. Right? Because that may sound odd, but it was not too long ago that someone was not able to walk through a front door. When I was at graduate school at Wayne State, I used to look at the pictures on the wall and see when the pictures moved from being all white men to when there was that one brown face that showed up in the picture on those class pictures along the walls. You go to different universities, and I would focus in on that brother, and I would say, you stood in this place, so I can stand in this place. So my nephew told me yesterday, he said, I'm happy that you're walking now in your truth, because then I'll be able to run. And, you know, I grew up Pentecostal, so that gave me almost want to get up and run out of my seat when he said that. But the reality of it is that, to Dr. Winn's point, it's not an option. You know, the fact that more Black men die from lung cancer than Black men are encouraged to be in clinical trials, it's not an option for me to advocate for diversity in clinical trials. And you said something earlier, Dr. Winn, that it's not always about hesitancy. Sometimes it's about access. And the people in the Iris group, they know this. When we start really giving people of color access to both have a real conversation about a shared decision-making about whether they want to participate in a clinical trial, about whether they want to get the vaccine, you'll find that our uptake looks very similar to other communities. We're willing to participate sometimes, but not given the access to participate, because the studies often are conducted in communities where we don't get our care, or clinics where we don't get our care, and in places where we don't live, and we have to take 2 buses and a train to get to a research study.
Yeah. So, you know, I was just sitting here thinking, and when I was growing up, my great-grandfather, Lacks, he would always say, people fear what they don't understand. And he would always look at me, he would say, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And I just want to let y'all know, like, you know, through the years, my why, it has become so transparent to me. Like you said, Dr. Winn, you've been talking since you've been 10, and Dr. Karriem, you said it better, that our why, we live it. And my why is real simple. My why is because my great-grandmother was born in a time where being Black was like being stepping on a landmine. My why is because there are issues that we've seen, like you said, in 1918 and 1952, 62, that our history's on repeat. These things are repeatedly happening to us, and no one's addressing these things. And, you know, my why is because we have a lack of access, and that we need people who need to step up, be accountable, and commit to their whys, and to continue these conversations. Because if we don't continue these conversations, if we don't get out here and we don't, you know, not be afraid to do something about it, because when you see something and you see a problem, if you don't speak on what you see, if you don't try to make resolution for what you see, you become part of the problem. So, you know, you guys, I'm just thinking, because a lot of these issues like that we have that's happening in our communities, gentrification and, you know, lack of access and support, and, you know, people simply not getting the treatment they need because something as simple as they can't get to the treatment. They don't have access to these things, or they're not being told about something, or we're going into the rooms with our doctors and our caregivers, and we're telling them exactly what we're going through and what we feel, and they're hearing what they need to hear to, you know, just sweep it under the rug. But these are some of the issues that I feel like people aren't talking enough about right now, and that we need to talk about to address health equity. Like, what's some of the issues that you guys see in your work and just in your day-to-day life that people aren't talking enough about, and to address these health inequities?
Yeah. So I just keep it real quick. A friend of mine once, he's a Buddhist, sort of said that people, you know, keep talking about why does this keep recurring in my life? And he said to me once, goes, those things are recurring in your life until you figure out how to solve them, right? So you're being presented the same problem because you clearly haven't gotten the clarity of how to solve them, so you can move to that next level. So when people talk about recurrent themes, we currently have these same things, again, since 1899, but I'd submit to you that with each of these segments, we've gotten a little bit better, right? It is not accepted, the greatest number of lynchings, for example, right? We know that we saw George Floyd lynched in front of us, modern day lynching, and yet, unlike 1920, where you had thousands, hundreds, lynched, where it was just an accepted that African Americans would say, well, that's just what it is, just please don't make white folk mad, right? We have actually learned to step up, to show up and show out. We've learned from MLK that decency and equality are not the same, although that's a lesson I think that we have to, on a daily basis, that's one of the things I'm trying to get young folk and older folks to recognize, that just decency is not the same as equality. Just because people won't smack you in the face don't still mean that you have the same access to healthcare. And I think somewhere along the lines, we've got intoxicated and baffled and taken off our point that just because people were nice, that was the equivalent of being equal. It's not. So my daily struggle is to recognize that in all of our systems, from our health systems to our researchers, that they recognize that the equity thing isn't just a Black folk thing, it's all of our thing. That the better off that we have now higher pools of people who are getting high quality education with high quality health, at the end of the day, it doesn't just benefit me as a Black man, it benefits many people beyond me and my community. So every day I'm chipping away at the reality that equity isn't just this soft thing that's kind of good that you give to people. Equity is shown even more up in COVID. You know, when people used to say we may not be in the same boat, but we in the same waters. Bald Head, South Carolina was the perfect example of that. I'm just going to take 2 seconds. Bald Head, South Carolina, one of the richest, wealthiest places in the United States, where folks who had the means ran away and went to Bald Head, South Carolina, thinking that during the COVID crisis that they would avoid COVID. Now, what they didn't know is that the people who were coming and cooking their food and cutting their grass were going back and forth over those bridges to get the Bald Head. And so even though they were mentally saying, I am protected here on Bald Head, be honest with you, we were so connected that wound up being the most infected place in the United States. So this concept that we are not connected is one that I'm chipping away at every day. I'm immediately working on 2 things at the Cancer Center. One, that cancer navigators matter. And then I understand that we've had a focus for God knows how many years on creating the next molecules that get out. And believe me, loving science is wrong. I don't want to be right. I'll be straight up. Karriem knows that. Everybody knows. I love science. I swear, I love science. But science has its limitations. And so refocusing this cancer center and making sure that we are putting equal amounts of money in implementation science and equal amounts of money in clinical navigators and community navigators is the way we're going to make some changes. So that's kind of what I'm doing on my, the little contributions that I'm trying to do is to reimagine what a cancer center that's designated could look like for the next 50 years and embracing that and being comfortable with that's exactly what I'm doing. I understand what the template is, but what will the next 50 years look like? That's what I'm trying to create here.
Dr. Winn, I'm so happy you spoke about navigators because as you know, a lot of my research looks at patient navigators, and patient navigators are nothing but every day. They can be anywhere from community health workers to people who are in the community, not scientific, not trained in, in formal sciences, or people who are trained. You can be someone, a patient navigator can be anyone from that has a GED to someone that has a master's in public health, just depending on what you do. And I was starting to get a little discouraged and said, because, I said, well, do we still need to be doing research on navigators? Is this still important? And I was reminded of how important it is, not only in my own experience but recently I read it, because Dr. Winn often encouraged us, your lived experience, but arm yourself with the literature as well. So I did a literature search and I found this article that talked about a woman right here in Chicago, an African-American woman in 2016 that was uninsured. That's just 5 years ago. That's not a long time ago. She was uninsured. And because she was uninsured, she lived in one of our communities. She went to the community hospital, not a big cancer center, not the UI Cancer Center. She went to a community hospital. She went to the emergency room at that community hospital because she had a lump in her breast. They sent her back home because she had had a normal mammogram the year before. She came back to the emergency department and said, this has not gone away. So she got a mammogram. Long story short, that mammogram found that she was told she had breast cancer and that they need to do a mastectomy, meaning they need to remove the breast. They didn't tell her what type of breast cancer she had. They didn't tell her the stage, grade, or any of that. They didn't do any testing, but she was Black and uninsured. And this is not a long time ago, you all. This is present day. Luckily, right as she was leaving that healthcare system, there was a patient navigator there that works with an organization that I used to work with as a community partner. It used to be called the Metropolitan Chicago Breast Cancer Task Force. Now it's called Equal Hope. One of the navigators there pulled that woman to the side and said, you know, you look a little despondent. What's going on? Because she had spiritual intuition, right? This navigator talked to this Black woman and said, wait a second. Just because you don't have insurance doesn't mean that there aren't programs out there that can get you seen. I'm going to get you an appointment at an academic medical center. And so the woman didn't know what an academic medical center was, because nor should she have to know. She should have been able to get equal care at her community hospital in her backyard. But because we're not there yet, this navigator got her an appointment with an academic medical center, got her a second opinion. Come to find out, the type of breast cancer she had was called inductal carcinoma in situ, meaning it's a type of breast cancer that didn't necessarily require a mastectomy. But what if that navigator had not been in that community hospital that day? What if that patient didn't have the fortitude to be connected to that navigator? She would have had an unnecessary mastectomy, removal of her breast. This is happening in modern day. So I was so encouraged by that story, and encouraged by another story that I'll tell quickly. I got an email from a colleague of mine, because we're a part of this program called the Chicago Cancer Health Equity Collaborative. I got an email from a patient who was Latinx or Latina, who said that, you know, with everything that's going on in this current climate, I'm uninsured, but I'm reluctant to go get this cancer screening that I'm in need of. I've had an abnormal screening, but I can't get into the public hospital for another year for this particular type of screening. A year. This person is going to have to wait a year. Our navigators, I emailed one of my actually I text one of our navigators and I said, look, I need you to make this happen. Our navigator was able to get that, what was a year appointment turned into a 5-day appointment. Instead of moving that appointment from being a year to moving that appointment 5 days out, and then being able to get them seen and throughout the system at no charge, right? Because as a federally qualified health system, we can see you despite your ability. And then we have a collaboration with the UI Cancer Center that supports it. And so I was so encouraged by this concept of patient navigators, somebody there to actually help coordinate your care through the system. And we need the navigators at the community level to tell you where you should go, and we need them inside the hospital. So I was really encouraged by these two stories and reminded of the importance of patient navigators, having someone that can be an advocate for you.
Wow, that's something. I just sit here and I was thinking, it just triggered so many thoughts, and just thinking about our stories and how we aren't being connected to the right people. I remember when my great-grandmother's genome was released, a lot of people in my family, they're not scientists, they don't have science background. So it was a scary thing, because it meant that we felt like if her genome was exposed, then ours would be too. And we met with Dr. Francis Collins and Kathy Hudson of the NIH. And when we met with them, my family met like maybe over a course of a month or two. And in that time, they received genetic counseling. And when they received the genetic counseling, we were informed that the genetic counseling we were receiving, most people receive this over a course of years. So we were getting like a crash course. And you think of how many people be part of clinical trials and research, and they don't have access to something as simple as that. Is really, really disheartening. And we all have to do better to lift our voice and make sure that we do connect people to patient navigators. Your work, Dr. Watson, don't stop that. That is so important, because it's a matter of it could be a matter of life or death to wait for a year for something that is pressing, and that's something that could get worse. Like we know that it's better to receive proper care versus the cure. Mm-hmm. Like why get the cure when we can just get the care? And we have to become, as people, I would say, just being part of a family, I learned that we have to ask questions, and we have to not just, allow people to make decisions for us, but we have to become partners in our own care. So I know we can go on and on, but
Veronica,
what about,
I do want to.
But I really like that. No, but go ahead, Karriem.
No, just a reminder, Dr. Winn, we often talk about policy too, and I love to tell people that I was telling someone about genetic counseling. The difference between genetic testing is when genetic testing, they take your blood and they find out certain things, but genetic counseling is just a conversation, right? That's the start of it, and both the genetic counseling and genetic testing can be covered by even our public insurance. And so I love to remind people that if you have a family history of cancer or any other condition, and you think that there may be a genetic link, whether you know or not, have that conversation with your doctor and see if you have access to a genetic counselor so that conversation can start. Because I was scared out of my mind losing my mother to breast cancer. My father had colon cancer and other family members. So when I reluctantly met with that genetic counselor, and they told me, they said, actually, you're not at elevated risk because your mother didn't have BRCA, and so, but you don't know that. And we live in fear, not knowing what we have access to.
So, and to pick up on that, this is where people try to say, I don't know nothing about science. I don't care. Science gonna be with you anyway. This is that quite examples where science and humanity match. And so in our communities, just because you say you don't want to know it, don't mean the diddly squat. Just because you don't want to actually recognize that your air is polluting, you still got to breathe it. So whether you want to know it or not, This is the intersectionality of science and humanity, right? So for example, I think that we have three things, particularly as African-American community. Secrets, I think this, Karriem, you know what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
Secrets kill.
Yeah,
family
secrets kill family.
You see what I'm saying? And so the reality is we have to stop playing that we're like perfect, right? You want information, but you want it to make it feel good. You want it to be perfect. Ain't nothing perfect. This is actually the walk in discomforted of being able to say, what information do we need to have out there in the health community? What information do we need to participate in clinical trials? What information do we need to actually have with the genes? Because imagine if you didn't have, we talk BRCA1, right? So that's a mutation of a gene that if we know you have it, we can then measure it, right? And then we can actually detect it early. Let's say the science wasn't done. So quit playing. People talk about science ain't got nothing to do with me. The science got everything to do with it. In fact, the freaking phone that you use every day actually was based on scientific principles that then got applied. So we need to stop walking around in our communities that science doesn't matter. And for the scientists, they need to stop walking around that humanity doesn't matter. And that quit playing that, well, as a basic scientist, you hear this, well, as a basic scientist, I'm not really quite sure how I'm going to interact the community. First of all, this very first time you look up from your Petri dish and you decide where to put your paper, you've now made a societal decision. You can put that paper in something that gets widely read, including journals that actually where community people could have access to that or not. The HELA, your great-grandmother, was part and parcel of where science and humanity intersects, right? We talk about science as being dispassionate and nothing, not emotional. But yet, time and time again, that's just stupid talk. That's just blind talk. That's hubris talking. Anytime you've now taken something from someone else that then advances science by 60 years, that allows you to discover the polio drug, that allows you to do all these other things, you have now made an impact in society. So this ridiculous conversation on the one hand of some of our communities, well, I ain't done this science, I don't need to pay no attention to none of this, is ridiculous. And it's equally ridiculous in the science community that you don't recognize that whether you know how to interact with the community or not, you impact them. And so part of what I hope you all are doing and what you all are doing really well is bringing attention to both of those things, that we do not live as disconnected as we think we do or what we want to do. Just because you're in a gated community, again, coming back to bald head, South Carolina, just coming back to bald head, South Carolina. Just because you was in a gated community, it didn't mean that COVID actually respected that gate. Just being honest.
Yep. You ain't escaping it. You're right, Dr. Winn. So guys, like, what about your 2021 priorities? And what about this work? What are your 2021 priorities? And what about this work excites you? Dr. Winn, I know that we'll be soon partnering up and figuring out what's going to happen with this report card that, oh my God, amazing. But what about your work, this becoming your priority? Like, what's going on with it?
Listen, science, I love science. I'm gonna be straight up with you. And some of the things that we're doing and getting a better understanding of the immunology or the way your body works to defend things and unlocking some of those secrets is now turned into an applied science of coming up with new medicines. We have even more to go. So the truth of the matter is, the crazy part about it is we are actually, most of us don't even recognize that we are right on the edge of being able to do things that, as we said, scientists and others couldn't even dream about, then writing fiction books to improve your health. That I'm excited about. I'm excited about bridging science and they're interconnected with that to communities and our humanity. So that's what I'm gonna be about for 2021.
Gotta bridge that gap. Dr. Karriem, what's going on with you?
One of the things that I'm really excited about is taking the research that we're doing and turning it into policy. For example, we're now putting this Illinois House bill up that's been passed, that's continuing to get through the legislature on community health workers. That when I was talking about those navigators, it's one thing to have a navigator, but we need more funding. We need more training opportunities for those community health workers to get trained and to get navigated, and to get trained and get job opportunities. And so we're working with state legislators to show through our research. So to me, that is such an exciting thing to be able to take research and turn that research into policy and action. Like just recently, because we saw that because of some of the advocacy work that we have been doing around lung cancer screening. Before I met Dr. Winn, I wasn't thinking about lung cancer screening. I wasn't thinking about tobacco research, but now it's the crux of my work, right? And now because of that, when I first started the project looking at tobacco use and lung cancer screening in Black men, the age you had to be was 55. Now they just lowered that age to 50. You used to have to smoke 30-pack years to get screened. Now it's 20-pack years. That's because we were encouraged to publish data on what we were seeing in our patient populations. And so I'm encouraged by how when we put our work out there, people have to listen. And if they're not listening, we're going to come and make you listen. We're going to go to wherever you are. We're going to put it in your journals and come with our policy briefs and say, this is what we find. We are going to be unapologetic. And so this next season about me is about being unapologetic about the gift that God has given us to use the platform that he's given us to be everything he said.
And Brother Karriem, just so you know, part of the Health Equity Report Card is getting our navigators paid. So we got a national march, brother. So we're going to hook back up.
And I saw what you're doing with longevity, Dr. Winn, to also work on getting racial and ethnic demographic information reported in those clinical trials. I saw you behind the scenes.
Doing a little something.
A little something. That seemed like a lot of something. But I think that was powerful. We all have to be unapologetic in what we're doing, and it is amazing to see how policy will be and how we are influencing policy. My great grandmother, she just took a major role in policy, and oh my God, I don't want to go on and on, but what are y'all biggest challenges that you face in your work? And how can the people out here that's listening, how can they help besides, being unapologetic and holding each other accountable? And, how can we bridge these gaps, guys? What are we going to do?
I think the biggest challenge I have is getting in our own way, right? And not actually, and the second biggest challenge is that and my grandmother said this for sure, that the way we move forward is by grace and humility. And many of the times we've seen over the last X number of years, a lack of grace and certainly a lack of humility. So my challenges are essentially rooted in the ability to be able to sort of step out my own way, have the grace, not only for myself, but the grace for others. And with that grace, have the humility to be able to understand that if I actually don't think I know everything, and I listen, I might actually learn something. So my challenge is to exercise that grace and humility every day so that hopefully others will also be inspired to actually have that grace and humility and share it.
And to echo that, I would say one of the challenges that we face in science is that I'm encouraging my colleagues, my team, my support circle, as we think about our research, we have to do a better job at connecting the dots. People don't live these separate lives. You know, we can't just think about, oh, I do HIV research, I do cardiovascular research, I do pulmonary research, because the reality is that communities that are impacted by chronic diseases are probably the same community that's impacted by cancer is probably the same community impacted by COVID-19. And as scientists, we know how to connect dots. We can do that. We can begin to connect these dots. And we got to reach beyond our scientific walls of basic and translational science and go to our sociologists too, because we got to begin to dismantle the systemic racism that's impacted these issues as well.
What's that? What you say? You said that the zip code neighborhood association does what? Intersects with your DNA all
That's right.
day.
Where you live can be more important than what your zip code can be more important than your genetic code. That's the quote sheet.
No lie. So guys, as we close, we are so honored. Like my family's so honored, like to have you guys as friends and to have you here today and to chat it up a little bit. And I know that everyone who's viewing are going to go back and feel so empowered to have leaders like you to recognize, you know, my great-grandmother impact during this Health Minority Month, and just to give them substance and give them that second win for why their work is so important. So how are you celebrating Henrietta Lacks during her centennial year? And what thoughts would you like to leave us with today?
And as we've closing out, we went ahead and shared the poll so that we can also get the attendees' feedback as well. So thank you for those that stayed on, and we'll have Dr. Winn and Dr. Watson share their final thoughts.
Dr. Watson, you want to go first?
Sure. I'm looking forward to future conversations, Veronica. This is not our first time collaborating, and I am going to be working with Sharia and others to say, now, how can we intentionally collaborate with you? We have a new cancer director that you all have to meet here in Chicago to talk about how can we continue our collaboration. And I'm just excited to continue to have you all as partners in the work that I do, but also ask the question, how can I use my platform to advance the work that you all are doing as well?
And I'd echo the same. I think that, you know, in this year, that anytime I can bring up that this is a centennial, I do, and also bring up the importance of why we must move forward. So whether it's on the national stage, regional, local, I'm bringing up and making sure that if you don't know, like Biggie said, well, you don't know, now you know. So people gonna know about the centennial. You know what I'm saying? That's how we rock.
Dr. Winn, if people want to get in touch with you and support your work, how can they do that?
Yeah, you can just get in contact two ways with them. Just call the Massey Cancer Center website. They have that, or you can just get send it to my email, which is just robert.winn@vcuhealth.org.
Dr. Watson, if people would like to work with you or champion your efforts, how can they do that?
Sure. Our work for our cancer center is cancer.uillinois.edu. Again, that website is cancer.uillinois.edu, or my email address is kswatson@uic.edu.
We'll continue these partnerships, and everyone out here who viewed today, like, thank you so much, and continue to go on to HELA100 and see how you can help the Lacks family continue our work and see what our next partnerships look like with these fellas and so many more. I just want to keep reminding people, like, the conversation we had today, I know that I'm going back and I'm going to look at this conversation on repeat because I'm super empowered, and it's going to keep me pushing to continue these conversations and get out here and advocate. We got to do our parts to bridge the gap, and, you know, I'm just grateful to have friends like these guys and to be part of the Iris Collaborative to continue these conversations. But guys, please go purchase with a purpose at HELA100.org, and just continue to, you can definitely view some other videos that we had done, some other conversations we had on HELA100. Like, just go scan the site, guys. But thank you so much, Sharia. This was very, very powerful. Thanks for putting this together.
Thank you all so much for joining us. This was a rich conversation. If you'd like to learn more, follow us at CELLebrate HELA or visit HELA100.org. Stay tuned, and we look forward to seeing you for next month's May Centennial Conversation. Thank you.